with their existing customers in terms of how they can better service them or do it faster and generate more revenues. Moving on to you, Adam, tell me about how, one, have you seen anything or what are things that you like? What is Microsoft doing, both from your business perspective? What services that you can offer us? How do you think this pans out for you guys?
Let me start with this. We've done some research recently just to understand, first of all, the importance that social has in discovering brands and discovering products and services that people will eventually find interesting. We did some research interesting, a little bit similar to Mark's, but it was a separate study. And what we did is we compared in a lot of mature markets. So we used the UK, US, and a few Western European countries, and some developing markets, including China, I think it was Indonesia, and Brazil. And what we were trying to understand is what were the methods by which people discovered brands or products that most appealed to their core values and core senses. And it was interesting because there was a pretty extreme dichotomy between the mature and emerging markets. The mature was that it was kind of termed as serendipity is how people discovered it. They happened to stumble upon, basically, a brand at the right time, at the right place, through advertising, a lot of placed media, et cetera. And those having had been at the right time had the most significant impact on inspiring the desire for that brand or to learn more about that brand. In a lot of emerging markets, particularly in Asia, it was the social discovery that was actually the most powerful. And it was the discovery of through social networks, word of mouth through friends, that ended up having the strongest inspiration to want to discover and learn more about a particular brand. So that was just interesting for us because as we talk to advertisers in terms of how they work with Microsoft and a lot of our online properties in terms of paid for media, it's important for us to understand that it's not just paid for media, but it's how social is a big part of the campaigns that they're planning. So when we talk to these to advertisers or marketers, we're often talking about what is the value and what mix does social advertising play into the whole brand and discovery part of their campaign planning. And it's a pretty big part, but their number one piece of feedback is that it's really difficult to measure. ROI is the most challenging part of social advertising. And so I think there's evolved this question, right, is what's the value of a like, of a fan? And a lot of people are still asking these questions. So it's important then to look at, paid for media. It still is an important part of the mix in terms of when you look at achieving your brand objectives. And so what we do is we're taking a different approach in terms of how we enable a lot of advertising, digital advertising on Microsoft online properties. We're trying to integrate social into, one, the experiences of all of our consumer online services. So when you use Skype, when you use Windows Live Messenger, when you use Hotmail, or even when you use our Bing search engine, you'll find that there will be social elements, social connections integrated into these experiences. You'll know if you search a result in our Bing website, Bing search engine, you'll know if a friend also searched that same search result and liked it because it's connected through Facebook. So we've built into some of these connections with partnerships of some of the most popular social networking sites, both in the West as well as in the East with some of the leading sites in China, to make sure that our sites are naturally more socially connected. And then by having these connections, we can sometimes integrate that into advertising experiences as well. So imagine seeing an advertisement if you go on to MSN.com or another leading website. And then advertisement you view has the opportunity to share that ad with someone, or it's had integrated the likes that your friends also were able to experience and kind of click through in terms of experiencing a connection with that brand. So it's socially connected, paid for advertising, which kind of integrates social and paid for media. So that's kind of one premise in terms of how we're trying to address a lot of the social stuff. Some interesting things that we're discovering in terms of how to connect this to commerce is how do we use some of our consumer online services, many of which are really social platforms. Think about a service like Skype or Windows Live Messenger for instant chat communication. These inherently are social tools, right? You're communicating, whether it's video, voice, or text chat with a number of your friends. We've connected all of those services with Facebook. So if you've got a long Facebook list of 400 people, those can appear and be exposed through your Windows Live Messenger account or your Skype account as well. But using these platforms for brands to not only advertise and have exposure to these consumers, but also bring them into a further and deeper experience that could take them into commerce eventually. I'll talk to you about a scenario we're very early stage prototyping right now in Skype. Skype is for those of you, how many use Skype or know of Skype? Pretty, okay. So Microsoft acquired Skype about a year and a half ago. And so in the Skype service, there's a lot of innovation happening. And one of these is how do we innovate, especially for the marketer, to be able to connect with our Skype user base. About 15% of Skype users worldwide are subscribed users, meaning they pay for the service. We don't serve advertising experiences to them. But we do for the 85% which want to enjoy the service for free. For those 85% of users, how do we meaningfully connect a brand to the users while they're in the Skype experience? Because our fundamental belief moving forward is this kind of advertising is going to be able to grow and become more meaningful and helpful for both brands and consumers if it's an additive experience. So imagine you're on a video call or a voice call with one of your friends and you're connected from Hong Kong to California. And maybe within your conversation pops up a little advertisement about planning travel. And it could be offered by a travel website, Expedia, Travelocity, one of the leading providers. And through that, you might be inspired to want to start exploring or planning a trip, and you could do that with a friend. You could do it with the friend that you're in conversation with now. You could invite them into the conversation and together explore that travel planning experience, figure out which hotels you want to stay, figure out which flight times work, explore a little bit more about the destination, but a way to bring not only the exposure of the brand, but bring them deeper into an experience that eventually could lead to commerce, whether it's online or offline, but leading them down that purchase path as Mark had talked about. So that's one example. We've got some prototypes happening very similar to the scenario I described, but that's an example where I think social platforms can really help you connect some of these between social, mobile, local, and commerce.
All right, thanks. Well, but as I hear you talk about these things, getting customer deeper into the experience, it dawns on me how important the role of technology is as an enabler at the back. I want to talk about that, but before I go there, Chad, you had mentioned something about relevance and messaging and communication. We were talking about targeting, that, this is a perfect place for one-to-one targeting, if I can talk about that. Can you speak to some of that, your thoughts on how important relevance is here and how you can actually execute on that messaging down to a single person?
Well, we talked a little bit actually on the previous session about the notion that social is the new local, is the new local. And a lot of our clients are very much focused on developing local market strategies to increase their conversions and relevance in particular to local markets. The example that I used a little bit earlier on about the large scale retailer in terms of generating relevance was, and I think did I use heart disease as the example for the check-in? Well, one of the things that we knew was that just from research is that heart disease is more prevalent in certain geographical areas of the country in the United States, particularly the rural South and the Midwest. So, having that understanding and that knowledge, knowing where to activate the program, being able to actually surround the messaging from a corporate social responsibility standpoint for the brand, in addition to delivering the in-store activation, created a hyper-relevant environment for the consumer. Here they were in a geographical location predisposed to a particular type of health risk. We knew what they were doing in the environment. We were able to sort of track that activity and co-promote other products and deliver messages relative to healthy lifestyle right there in the retail environment as a result of checking in and opting in for that. So I don't know if that answered.
Yeah, I think so. I think we now have the tools to really work fast and really target our communication down to a single individual. We're talking about having a mobile device in our hands.
Yeah, and I guess there was one sort of point I wanted to build on. Actually, Adam, it was actually a great piece of research that Microsoft Advertising did about the sort of purchase path of consumers. You probably recall you published it a little bit earlier this year, and it talked about the behaviors associated with different categories of shoppers. Presumably for the folks in the room that represent on the brand side. Of the corporate side, you come from a different category, whether it's apparel or grocery. And one of the things that was particularly interesting, and it gets to your point about relevance, is this idea that depending upon what category a consumer is shopping against, the decision path is different. And whether or not a consumer is it's a heavily researched purchase item. If it was, for example, an impulse buy or a habitual buy, and what does that give us as marketers and communicators? It gives us pretty strong earmarkings that we can use SoLoMoCo as, for example, against a habitual category, a disruption method during the purchase cycle to introduce a message or a promotion in a way that's going to make it more relevant for the consumer.
Right. And then building on that, my question to you is, when you talk to your customers, are they by categories? Are you seeing there are some categories who are more prone to this marketing strategy? Is it big companies, small companies, large companies? And also if you can talk about geographic dispersion, if you know of any.
Yeah, I can build on that point that's just discussed. And actually it sounds like we've researched something that's very close to this in terms of different categories and how shoppers go through that decision funnel, because we looked at different industries as well. We also looked at different stages of the purchase cycle. So you go from finding a need, creating the wish, to shopping around, narrowing the decision, and then purchasing and after sales services. And we see that in that earned media play an important role all along, but the paid media still have a role to play, and that is chiefly in the awareness stages. So the very early stages where people are still looking for options, there is still a huge claimed usage of paid media, TV, online, etc. So it just shows that, coming back to integrated media and social media is important, but it's not the only thing. You also need to have the awareness creation at the beginning. And it's different by different categories. It's different by company size, as you just mentioned. Actually, we didn't look at it in that way, mainly at different categories. But we do see very different patterns in very different countries. And partly that is related